The mahogany casket gleamed under the chapel lights. My father's favorite photo nestled among white lilies and sprays of lavender. I stood frozen at the edge of the room, watching as Rachel, my sister, my only sibling, leaned close to whisper something to our father's lawyer. Her black designer dress probably cost more than my monthly rent, her grief immaculately presented for the line of mourners. 2 funerals in 3 months. Mom in October, Dad just yesterday. The Mitchell family reduced to dust and memories and whatever was written in their will. Emma? A hand touched my shoulder. Marcus Hoffman, Dad's attorney for over 20 years, gestured toward the side door. We need to discuss some matters. Rachel is already aware. Already aware. Of course she was. I followed him to a small office, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Rachel sat primly in one of the leather chairs, her husband Greg standing behind her like a sentinel. I'm sorry to do this today, Marcus began, his voice gentle but professional. But Thomas left specific instructions about the timing. He pulled out a document from his briefcase. I'll be overseeing the reading of the will tomorrow at my office, but there are immediate considerations regarding the house and accounts. Rachel dabbed at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Emma, I know this is hard, but we need to be practical. Practical. Like when she'd moved back to Oak Ridge 6 months ago, just as Mom's cancer took a turn. Like when she'd suddenly become Dad's devoted daughter after 15 years of sporadic holiday visits. Marcus cleared his throat. For now, I can tell you that Thomas amended his will shortly before his passing. The family home and the majority of the liquid assets will transfer to Rachel, as she has agreed to manage Mitchell Financial Consulting. Going forward. The room tilted. What? My voice sounded distant even to myself. But I'm the one with the finance degree. I'm the one who helped Dad with the business for the past 10 years. Rachel's face hardened for just a moment before melting into sympathy. Emma, you know how Dad felt. You've always been more of an employee than a partner. He wanted someone with vision to take the company forward. Vision. Like the vision she demonstrated when she abandoned the family business for the bright lights of Chicago, leaving me to help Dad build it into something sustainable. Is this true? I asked Marcus. He hesitated, which told me everything. Thomas made changes to his estate planning in the past month. Everything is legal, Emma. Legal, but was it right? As Rachel began discussing funeral arrangements with Marcus, I stared out the window at the gray Oregon sky, feeling as hollow as the clouds. Dad and I had talked about the future of the business countless times. He'd always said we were partners. What had changed? Emma? Rachel's voice cut through. My thoughts. We'll need you to move your things out of the house by the end of the week. Greg and I will be moving in, and we need to start renovations. Renovations. They were already planning to erase Mom and Dad from their own home. I nodded mechanically. The room suddenly too small, too airless. I excused myself and walked quickly back to the chapel, where strangers were paying respects to a man they probably knew better than my sister did. As I stood beside my father's casket one last time, a memory surfaced. Dad and me, 5 years ago, walking into West Side Trust Bank. This is just between us, Em, he'd said with a wink. Sometimes a man needs a place for his secrets. The safety deposit box, the one Rachel knew nothing about. I touched the cold, polished wood of the casket. I'll figure this out, Dad, I whispered. I promise. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Part 1. The Revelation. The days after a funeral blur together. In a haze of casseroles and condolences, I moved through them like a ghost, packing up my life from my childhood home while Rachel directed a team of interior designers through the rooms, pointing out walls to be knocked down and fixtures to be replaced. We're thinking of converting Dad's study into a home gym. she mentioned casually as I carefully wrapped Mom's china. I nearly dropped the plate I was holding. Dad's study, the heart of our home, where he'd taught me about balance sheets and profit margins, where he'd built Mitchell Financial Consulting from nothing. That seems quick, I managed, sliding the plate into a box. Rachel shrugged, tapping something into her phone. No point dwelling in the past, Em. You could learn from that. Learn from that. As if her 6 months of playing devoted daughter trumped my decade of actually being one. I finished packing in silence, loading boxes into my Honda Civic while Rachel and Greg discussed paint swatches in the kitchen. My entire life reduced to what could fit in a mid-sized sedan and a small storage unit. The next morning, I sat stiffly in Marcus Hoffman's office as he read the will. Rachel and Greg across from me, polished and poised. The terms were exactly as Marcus had previewed. Rachel inherited the house, the business, and nearly all liquid assets. I received a modest sum that wouldn't cover 6 months of rent in Oak Ridge, plus Mom's old Volvo that had been sitting in the garage for years. There must be some mistake, I said when Marcus finished. Dad always said we were partners in the business. Rachel sighed dramatically. Emma, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Dad changed his mind. He told me he was worried about your financial judgment. My financial judgment? I had an accounting degree and had helped grow the business by 40% over the past 5 years. Marcus looked uncomfortable. Thomas did express some concerns about Emma's approach to risk management. What concerns? I demanded. We discussed every business decision together. Rachel gave me a pitying look. Dad confided in me that you were too conservative with investments. He wanted someone who could take Mitchell Financial to the next level. The room felt suddenly cold. This wasn't the father I knew, the man who preached caution and steady growth, who built his business on trust and careful planning. If you'll sign here, Marcus said, sliding a document toward me. This acknowledges receipt of your inheritance. I signed mechanically, my mind racing. Something wasn't right. Dad wouldn't have cut me out without a word, without a warning. The father I knew wouldn't have dismissed a decade of loyalty in favor of Rachel's sudden interest in the family business. I've also drawn up transfer papers for Mitchell Financial Consulting, Marcus continued. Rachel will take ownership effective immediately. Rachel beamed. I've already lined up some exciting new clients. The company needed fresh blood. Fresh blood. As if Dad's business philosophy, our business philosophy, was outdated and stale. And what about Dad's clients? I asked. The ones who've trusted us for years? We'll be evaluating the client list, Greg interjected, focusing on higher value accounts. Higher value accounts. Code for dropping the small local businesses Dad had built relationships with over decades. I left the meeting in a daze, walking blindly through downtown Oak Ridge until I found myself at the Corner Brew. I ordered a coffee and sat by the window, watching rain streak the glass. Something wasn't adding up. Dad had been sharp until the end, organizing client files, reviewing quarterly reports with me just days before his heart attack. There had been no hint, no suggestion that he was unhappy with my work or planning such a drastic change. And then there was Rachel's sudden interest in the family business. My sister, who had mocked Dad's small-town ambitions and fled to Chicago the moment she could. The sister who had barely called when Mom got sick. The sister who had mysteriously returned just as Dad's health began to decline. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through recent photos. Dad and me at the office Christmas party, both of us laughing as he attempted to untangle himself from tinsel. His eyes clear, his smile genuine. Not the actions of a man planning to cut his daughter out of his life's work, the safety deposit box. The thought returned like a beacon. Dad had opened it 5 years ago, insisting it remain our secret. Just some personal items, he'd said at the time. Things I want to make sure are protected. I'd never asked what was inside. It had seemed unimportant then. Now it might be everything. That evening, I sat in my new apartment, a stark one-bedroom above the hardware store downtown, surrounded by boxes of my hastily packed life. I pulled out Dad's old leather datebook, flipping through until I found what I needed. The safety deposit box number and location. Westside Trust Bank, Box 413. I still had the key. Dad had given it to me for safekeeping, another small token of the trust between us. "Keep this somewhere secure," he'd said. "Just in case." Just in case of what? I wondered now. I tucked the key into my wallet. First thing tomorrow, I would find out what Dad had considered important enough to hide from everyone but me. Sleep came fitfully that night, my dreams filled with Rachel's smirking face and the echo of my father's voice. When dawn finally broke, I dressed quickly and drove across town to Westside Trust Bank. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The building was smaller than First National, where our family had always banked, more discreet. Perfect for secrets. I approached the clerk, handed over my ID and the key. "Box 413, I said. "I'm the authorized user." She checked the records, nodded, and led me to a private room. Minutes later, she returned with a long metal box. "Take all the time you need," she said, closing the door behind her. My hands trembled as I inserted the key. The lid opened with a soft click, revealing a stack of documents, a small leather journal, and a USB drive. The journal came first, Dad's familiar handwriting filling the pages. I flipped through quickly, then stopped, my breath catching at a passage dated just 2 months ago. Rachel approached me again about changing the will, saying Emma isn't committed enough to the business. That's absurd. Emma has been my right hand for years, but Rachel is persistent, and Catherine's medical bills have put us in a difficult position. I don't know what to do. My heart pounded as I continued reading, entries growing more disturbing with each page. Rachel introduced me to her financial advisor today. Something about him seems off. He's suggesting I take out loans against the business to cover expenses. That goes against everything I believe in, everything I've taught Emma. And then, dated 3 weeks before his death, I've made a terrible mistake. The documents I signed weren't what Rachel claimed. I've learned she and Greg are heavily in debt from failed investments in Chicago. They're desperate. I fear they see Mitchell Financial as their way out. I can't let them dismantle everything I've built. Tomorrow I'm meeting with Marcus to fix this. But Dad never made it to that meeting. His heart attack came the next morning. With shaking hands, I turned to the documents in the box. Loan applications with my father's signature. Financial statements showing large transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. And most damning of all, a copy of what appeared to be the original will, the one that split everything equally between Rachel and me, with me taking control of Mitchell Financial Consulting. The USB drive contained even more, screenshots of emails between Rachel and Greg discussing their financial troubles, planning their return to Oak Ridge, and most chillingly, Greg writing, "Your father won't be a problem much longer. The stress alone might solve our problem." I sat back, my mind reeling. The story was clear now. Rachel and Greg, facing financial ruin in Chicago, had returned not out of familial duty but desperation. They'd manipulated our grieving father, exploited his vulnerability after Mom's death, and somehow gotten him to sign documents he didn't fully understand. And then, when he'd discovered their deception and planned to correct it, he'd conveniently suffered a fatal heart attack. My hands curled into fists. Rachel hadn't just stolen my inheritance, she might have contributed to our father's death. I carefully repacked everything into the safety deposit box, keeping only the journal and copies of the most important documents. As I drove back to my apartment, a plan began to form. Rachel thought she had won. thought she had covered her tracks. She had no idea what was coming. That night, I called Daniel Cooper, a forensic accountant I'd met at a conference last year. "I need help," I told him, explaining the situation without revealing my suspicions about Dad's death. "Financial manipulation of the elderly is unfortunately common," Daniel said grimly, "especially when there's cognitive vulnerability after losing a spouse. If what you're saying is true, we can trace the money and prove coercion." "How long will it take?" I asked. "Depends on how careful they were," he replied. "But people who take shortcuts with ethics usually take shortcuts with cover-ups too." Over the next week, I maintained a facade of defeated acceptance. I met Rachel for coffee, listening silently as she outlined her vision for Dad's company. "We're rebranding as Parker Financial Group," she announced. "Fresh start, bigger ambitions." Parker Financial Group, not even keeping Dad's name. "What about Dad's clients?" I asked. "Mrs. Henderson's bakery, the Richardson's hardware store?" Rachel waved a dismissive hand. "Too small. We're focusing on corporate clients now." "And the employees?" "Several of whom had been with Dad for over a decade." "Restructuring," she said vaguely. "Greg has connections with a younger, more dynamic team." "Younger, more dynamic. Code for cheaper and more willing to follow questionable practices." I nodded, playing my part perfectly, the defeated sister, the overlooked daughter. All while Daniel combed through financial records, all while I built my case piece by piece. "It's worse than you thought," Daniel told me 3 days later, spreading documents. Across my kitchen table, they've already taken out loans against the business assets, nearly $500,000 transferred to offshore accounts. $500,000. Money that should have been securing the business's future, honoring Dad's legacy. "Can we prove it's fraud?" I asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "The timing of the signature on these loan documents is suspicious. Your father was in the hospital that day for tests." Another piece of the puzzle, another nail in Rachel's coffin. "What about the will?" I asked. "Can we prove it was changed under duress?" "That's trickier," Daniel admitted. "But these bank transfers from your father's personal account to Rachel and Greg's joint account look like textbook elder financial abuse, especially combined with the journal entries." I stared at the evidence spread before me. My sister hadn't just stolen my inheritance. She'd betrayed our father's trust, possibly hastened his death, and was now systematically dismantling his life's work. "What's our next step?" I asked. Daniel gathered the documents carefully. "We take this to the district attorney and to Marcus Hoffman. He needs to know he may have facilitated fraud." I nodded, a cold determination settling over me. Rachel thought she had everything under control. She thought she had won. She had no idea what was hidden in that safety deposit box. She had no idea what was coming. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds of my apartment as I spread the contents of Dad's safety deposit box across my kitchen table. The evidence was overwhelming, yet I still struggled to accept the depth of Rachel's betrayal. How had my own sister orchestrated something so calculated, so cruel? I traced my finger over Dad's handwriting in the journal, his words growing more distressed with each entry. The final pages contained hurried notes, names, dates, account numbers, as if he'd been racing against time to document everything before it was too late. My phone buzzed. Daniel Cooper. "Emma, I've been digging into those financial records you shared," he said without preamble. "The picture isn't pretty." I braced myself. "Tell me." "The loans taken out against Mitchell Financial weren't just excessive, they were potentially criminal. The applications show your father's signature, but the notary date is from when hospital records confirm he was undergoing tests. He physically couldn't have signed them." My stomach tightened. "Forged signatures?" "Almost certainly. And there's more. The funds weren't used for business expansion as claimed on the applications. I've traced transfers to pay off Greg's personal debts, gambling losses, failed investment schemes, tax liens from their time in Chicago. The pieces were falling into place. Rachel and Greg hadn't just returned to Oak Ridge to help with Mom's illness. They'd been fleeing financial ruin. "What about the will?" I asked, thinking of the document hidden in Dad's safety deposit box that contradicted everything Marcus Hoffman had presented. "That's where things get interesting," Daniel said. "I spoke with a colleague at the State Bar Association. If a will was changed while your father was under duress or being manipulated, we have grounds to challenge it, especially with evidence of financial elder abuse." Financial elder abuse. The term made my blood run cold. This wasn't just about inheritance or sibling rivalry. Rachel had exploited our father's grief and vulnerability after Mom's death. "How do we proceed?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Carefully," Daniel cautioned. "People who commit this kind of fraud don't give up easily. We need to build a bulletproof case before confronting them." After hanging up, I sat staring at the evidence spread before me. Dad had known something was wrong. He'd created this secret record, ensured I had access to it. He'd trusted me to discover the truth. I wouldn't let him down. The next morning, I drove to Hoffman and Associates, the converted Victorian house where Marcus had practiced law for 30 years. His secretary gave me a sympathetic smile as I requested a meeting. "He's with clients until noon, but I can squeeze you in after that." I thanked her and settled into a leather chair in the waiting area, rehearsing what I would say. Marcus had been Dad's friend for decades. Surely he would be horrified to learn he might have unknowingly facilitated fraud. At 12:15, Marcus emerged from his office, surprise flickering across his face at the sight of me. "Emma, I wasn't expecting you. Is everything all right?" Nothing had been all right since Mom's diagnosis 9 months ago, but I forced a polite smile. "I need to discuss something important about Dad's estate. Do you have a few minutes?" He gestured me into his office, settling behind his imposing mahogany desk. "What can I help you with?" I took a deep breath. "Marcus, I have reason to believe the will you executed wasn't my father's true last wishes. I think he was coerced into changing it." The lawyer's expression hardened. "That's a serious accusation, Emma. Do you have evidence?" "I do," I said, pulling out copies of the documents from the safety deposit box. Dad kept a journal and a copy of his original will, the one that split everything equally between Rachel and me. Marcus's face remained impassive as he examined the papers, but I noticed his hands tighten around the edges of Dad's journal. "This doesn't necessarily prove coercion," he said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. "People change their minds about estate planning all the time." "What about this?" I slid across the loan applications with the dubious signatures. Dad couldn't have signed these. He was in the hospital having cardiac tests that day. A flicker of genuine concern crossed Marcus's face. "I wasn't involved in these transactions." "I know," I reassured him, "but you need to be aware that you may have been used to legitimize something deeply unethical, possibly illegal." Marcus removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Emma, these are troubling allegations, but challenging a properly executed will is extremely difficult. The courts are reluctant to overturn final wishes, even with inconsistencies." "What about elder financial abuse?" I countered. "The journal entries show Dad realized he'd been manipulated. He was planning to meet with you to fix it, but had his heart attack the next day." At the mention of the planned meeting, Marcus's expression changed subtly. He rose and walked to his window, staring out at the rainy street below. "Thomas did call me," he admitted quietly. "Said he needed to discuss an urgent change to his will. We scheduled for the following morning, but then I got the call about his collapse." A chill ran through me. Dad had been so close to setting things right. "Marcus, you've known my father for 30 years, I said, my voice breaking slightly. Do you really believe he would have cut me out of the business we built together? That he would have left everything to Rachel after she'd been absent from his life for over a decade? The lawyer turned back to me, his professional facade cracking. No, he said finally. It never sat right with me. But the documents were in order, and Rachel was very persuasive about Thomas's wishes. She lied to you, I said simply. And now she and Greg are dismantling Dad's legacy. They've already changed the company name, dropped his long-term clients, and taken out fraudulent loans. Marcus returned to his desk, examining the evidence again with fresh eyes. This journal, the handwriting is definitely Thomas's, and these transfers. He shook his head. This goes beyond family disagreement, Emma. This looks like fraud. Will you help me? I asked. He was silent for a long moment, 30 years of professional caution warring with personal loyalty to my father. Finally, he nodded. I'll review everything and consult with a colleague who specializes in estate litigation. In the meantime, don't confront Rachel. If these allegations are true, she's already demonstrated she's willing to go to extraordinary lengths for money. I left Marcus's office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. The truth would come out. Or so I thought. 2 days later, Marcus called me, his voice strained. Emma, something's happened. My office was broken into last night. Files were disturbed, including your father's. My blood ran cold. Was anything taken? Hard to say for certain, but the timing is concerning. Have you told anyone else about the safety deposit box? Just Daniel Cooper, the forensic accountant. No one else knows. Keep it that way, Marcus advised. And Emma, be careful. Secure those original documents somewhere safe. The warning sent a shiver down my spine. What had begun as suspicion of manipulation was evolving into something darker. If Rachel discovered what I knew, what would she do? That afternoon, I received a text from Rachel. Coffee tomorrow? Need to discuss something about Dad's personal items. My instinct was to refuse, but Marcus's advice echoed in my mind. Don't let on what I knew. Maintaining the facade of the defeated sister might be my best protection. Sure. Corner brew at 10? I replied, trying to sound normal. Perfect. See you then? The message was followed by a heart emoji that made my stomach turn. I spent the evening making duplicate copies of everything from the safety deposit box, storing sets in different locations, one with Daniel, one in a locked drawer at my apartment, and the originals returned to the bank. If Rachel was willing to break into a lawyer's office, she wouldn't hesitate to search my home. The night passed fitfully, my sleep broken by nightmares of Rachel standing over Dad's hospital bed, documents in hand, pressuring him to sign as monitors beeped in the background. Morning came with steely gray skies and a persistent drizzle. That matched my mood. I arrived at the corner brew early, choosing a table in the back with a clear view of the door. Rachel arrived precisely at 10, designer raincoat barely dampened by the weather, perfect makeup in place. Emma, she said warmly, as if we were still the close sisters we'd been as children, before ambition and greed had transformed her. Thanks for meeting me. I forced a smile. Of course. She ordered a complicated latte with precise specifications while I requested plain black coffee. Even our beverage choices highlighted the divergence in our paths. So, Rachel began once the barista had left. Greg and I have been sorting through Dad's personal items. We found some old family photos I thought you might want. She slid a small envelope across the table. I opened it cautiously. Inside were childhood pictures. Rachel and me building sandcastles at the coast, swimming in Lake Oswego, posing, with our parents at Christmas time. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched despite everything. These moments had been real once. There's something else, Rachel continued, her voice dropping. We found some strange financial records in Dad's study. Transactions I can't explain. Withdrawals from accounts I didn't know existed. My heart rate accelerated. Was she fishing for information about the safety deposit box? Dad handled a lot of client accounts, I said carefully. Could be related to the business. Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly. These were personal accounts, Emma. Large cash withdrawals in the months before he died. It's concerning. She was definitely fishing, the predator sensing a threat to her perfectly executed plan. I wasn't involved in Dad's personal finances. I lied smoothly. He was a private person. That's what's strange, Rachel persisted. Dad was never secretive with me, especially after I moved back. We discussed everything. Everything except the safety deposit box. Everything except his growing suspicions about her motives. Maybe he was setting something aside for retirement, I suggested with a shrug. Rachel studied me intently. Maybe. Or maybe there's something... You're not telling me. The accusation hung between us, wrapped in false sweetness but sharp as a blade. What would I be hiding? I asked, meeting her gaze steadily. She smiled, a predatory curve of perfectly glossed lips. I don't know, Emma, but it's funny how you've suddenly stopped fighting about the will, about the business. It's not like you to give up so easily. I'm grieving, Rachel, I said, allowing real emotion to color my words. Fighting just seemed pointless. She sipped her latte, unconvinced. Well, if you do come across any of Dad's personal papers, financial records, that sort of thing, they should come to me, as executor of the estate. There it was, the real purpose of this meeting. Of course, I agreed, the lie bitter on my tongue. If I find anything, you'll be the first to know. We chatted for another 15 minutes about inconsequential things, the renovations to the family home, mutual acquaintances from high school, the unusually rainy spring. All the while, I felt Rachel watching me, probing for weaknesses, for signs I knew more than I was letting on. As we parted outside the coffee shop, she hugged me, a gesture that once would have felt natural, but now made my skin crawl. We should do this more often, she said. We're the only family each other has left now. Family. The word felt hollow coming from someone who had systematically deceived our father and stolen what should have been shared between us. Sure, I replied. That would be nice. I watched her walk to her luxury SUV, the vehicle purchased with money that rightfully belonged to Dad's legacy. My hands trembled slightly as I unlocked my own car, not from fear, but from the effort of restraining my anger, of maintaining the charade. Rachel suspected something. The office break-in, her fishing questions about Dad's finances. She knew. There were loose ends she hadn't secured, and she wouldn't stop looking until she found them. I had to move faster. That evening, Daniel called with news that accelerated our timeline. Emma, I've been tracking the business accounts, he said, urgently. They're being systematically drained. Asset transfers, inflated consultant payments to shell companies, inventory liquidation at below-market rates. They're gutting the company. My stomach dropped. How quickly? At this rate, Mitchell Financial will be an empty shell within weeks. They're not even trying to run it. They're harvesting it for cash. The business my father had built over 30 years, that I had helped grow for the past decade, being dismantled piece by piece for quick profit. What can we stop it? I asked, panic rising. We need to move on the fraud allegations immediately, Daniel said. I have enough documentation to approach the district attorney's office. But Emma, he hesitated. Once we do this, there's no going back. Rachel and Greg will know exactly what you've discovered. The warning was clear. Once, I officially accused my sister of fraud, of elder abuse. Our relationship, whatever remained of it, would be destroyed forever. And if Rachel had gone to such lengths to secure her inheritance, what might she do when threatened with losing it all? "Do it," I said firmly. "Dad trusted me to protect his legacy. I won't let him down." The next morning, Daniel and I met with Assistant District Attorney Valerie Chen, a sharp-eyed woman with a reputation for prosecuting white-collar crime. She listened intently as we laid out the evidence: the suspicious will changes, the forged loan documents, the systematic draining of company assets. "The timing of your father's heart attack is concerning," she noted, studying his journal entries, "especially given his documented intention to reverse the changes to his will. Are you suggesting—" I couldn't bring myself to finish the question. "I'm not suggesting anything yet," Chen said carefully. "But financial crimes often escalate when the perpetrators feel cornered. Your father realizing he'd been manipulated would certainly qualify as a threat to their plans." The implication hung heavy in the air. Had Rachel and Greg's machinations contributed to Dad's death? The possibility had haunted my nightmares, but hearing a prosecutor imply it made my blood run cold. "What happens now?" I asked. "I'll open an investigation," Chen said. "We'll subpoena the full financial records, interview Marcus Hoffman formally, and examine the medical records surrounding your father's death. In the meantime, we can file for an emergency injunction to freeze the business assets and prevent further liquidation." An injunction, a way to stop Rachel and Greg from finishing what they'd started. "How quickly can that happen?" Daniel asked. "I can have it before a judge this afternoon," Chen replied. "But understand, Ms. Mitchell, once I file these papers, your sister will be notified. She'll know you've taken legal action." "I understand," I said, steeling myself for what was to come. "Do it." The wheels of justice began turning that very day. By 4 o'clock, a judge had signed the emergency injunction freezing all assets of Mitchell Financial Consulting pending investigation. By 5, Rachel would have been officially served notice. I drove home in a daze, emotions warring within me, relief that the bleeding of Dad's company had been stanched, anxiety about Rachel's reaction, and beneath it all, a profound sadness. How had we come to this? The sister who had taught me to ride a bike, who had defended me against playground bullies, was now someone I feared might have contributed to our father's death. My phone began ringing as I pulled into my apartment complex. "Rachel." I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately, and again. Finally, a text. "What have you done?" I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that legal documents hadn't already communicated. Inside my apartment, I double-checked the locks and drew the blinds. Then I played Rachel's voicemail. "How dare you?" Her voice shook with rage. "After everything Greg and I have done for this family, you think you can accuse us of—" She broke off, too furious to continue. "You have no idea what you've started. Emma." "No idea at all. You think you're so clever with your little investigation, but you don't know anything. Call me back immediately or I swear you'll regret it." The threat was unmistakable. I forwarded the voicemail to Ada, Chen, and Daniel, documenting everything. An hour later, my phone rang again. Marcus Hoffman this time. "Emma," he said without preamble, "Rachel just stormed into my office demanding to know what I told you about the will." "Are you all right?" I asked, concerned. "She threatened to sue me for malpractice, breach of confidentiality, every legal threat she could think of. I've practiced law for 30 years, and I've never seen someone unravel so completely." "I'm sorry you got caught in the middle of this," I said sincerely. "Don't be. Your father was my friend, not just my client. I should have questioned the will changes more thoroughly." He paused. "Emma, be careful. Rachel mentioned she was heading to your apartment next. She's not in a rational state." Fear shot through me. "Thanks for the warning." I had just hung up when pounding began on my door, so violent the hinges rattled. "Emma!" Rachel's voice sharp with fury. Open this door right now. I remained frozen in place, heart hammering. I know you're in there. More pounding. You think you can destroy everything with your lies? Your pathetic jealousy? Open the door. I crept to the peephole. Rachel stood in the hallway, face contorted with rage, designer clothes disheveled. Greg loomed behind her, his expression equally thunderous. The police have been called, I said loudly enough to be heard through the door. I suggest you leave. Police? Rachel's laugh was brittle. For what? A sister visiting her only. Family? Don't be dramatic. For trespassing and harassment, I replied steadily. And possibly much more serious charges once the investigation is complete. Investigation! Greg spat. Based on what? Some pathetic diary entries from a confused old man? The dismissal of Dad, his dignity, his intelligence, ignited my anger. Based on forged signatures, fraudulent loans, and financial elder abuse. Not to mention the suspicious timing of my father's death after he discovered what you were doing. A sudden silence fell in the hallway. You're accusing us of… what exactly? Rachel's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. I'm not accusing you of anything, I said carefully. The district attorney's office is investigating. The evidence will speak for itself. Another long silence. Then Rachel's voice, eerily calm now. You've made a serious mistake, Emma. We came here to offer you a settlement. A generous share of the estate if you dropped these ridiculous allegations. But now I see you're too far gone. A settlement? I echoed incredulously. You stole my inheritance, Rachel. You manipulated our grieving father. There's no settlement offer that changes those facts. Facts? Rachel scoffed. You mean your interpretation. Your paranoid theories because you couldn't accept that Dad trusted me more in the end. Pathetic. The signatures on the loan documents were forged, I replied. That's not a theory. It's a felony. Prove it, Greg challenged. Your word against ours. And who do you think people will believe? The successful couple running a thriving business? Or the jealous sister who couldn't handle being passed over? His confidence shook me. Could they really spin this? Make me look like the villain? The safety deposit box, Rachel said suddenly, her voice sharp with realization. That's where you found it, isn't it? Dad's secret stash, the one he mentioned to me before he died. My blood froze. Dad had told her about the box? He said it contained his most important legacy, Rachel continued, triumph creeping into her voice. But he never gave me the key. That's what you've been hiding. She was bluffing. Dad would never have mentioned the box to her. It was our secret, the one thing he had kept just between us. I don't know what you're talking about, I lied. Oh, Emma. Rachel's voice dripped with false sympathy. Always such a bad liar. Dad told me everything toward the end. Everything except where that key was hidden. I remained silent, unwilling to confirm or deny anything. We'll find it, she promised. Whatever evidence you think you have, we'll find it and deal with it. And when this investigation falls apart from lack of evidence, we'll sue you for defamation. Take whatever pittance you inherited and leave you with nothing. You'd need to have a reputation worth damaging for defamation, I retorted. Hard. To claim that when you're being investigated for fraud. Greg's voice came next, low and menacing. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Emma. No idea what we're capable of. A chill ran down my spine at the naked threat. Like I said, I repeated, the police have been called. I suggest you leave. As if on cue, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Rachel and Greg must have heard them too. This isn't over, Rachel hissed through the door. Not by a long shot. I watched through the peephole as they retreated down the hallway, their postures rigid with fury. Only when I heard their car start did I allow myself to breathe again. The police arrived minutes later, taking my statement about the harassment. I didn't mention the fraud investigation or the threats. Those were for Ada Chen to handle. But I did request additional patrols near my apartment, which the officers agreed to provide. That night, I lay awake in bed, replaying Rachel's words. Was she bluffing about Dad mentioning the safety deposit box? It seemed impossible. He had been so insistent that it remained between us. But then again, I had never imagined Rachel capable of the deception she'd perpetrated either. Doubt crept in like a fog. What if there were things about Dad I didn't know? What if, in his final weeks, he had shared more with Rachel than I realized? No. I shook the thoughts away. Dad's journal told the real story. His growing suspicions, his realization he'd been manipulated, his determination to make things right. Those weren't the actions of a man who had suddenly decided to trust Rachel with his secrets. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Chen got a warrant for the company's complete financial records. Forensic accountants starting tomorrow. We're making progress. But at what cost? The sister I had once loved was now a stranger threatening me from my doorway. The family I had cherished was shattered beyond repair. As dawn broke, I made a decision. I couldn't stay in my apartment. Not when Rachel and Greg knew where I lived. Not when they were desperate and cornered. I packed a bag with essentials, gathered the copies of Dad's documents, and loaded everything into Mom's old Volvo. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not Daniel, not Marcus Hoffman, not even Ada Chen. The fewer people who knew, the safer I would be. As I drove out of Oak Ridge in the early morning light, I glanced in my rearview mirror at the town where I'd spent my entire life. The town where my family had lived and died. The town I was now fleeing. Rachel thought this was about money, about inheritance. She didn't understand that it had never been about that for me. It was about truth, about justice, about honoring the father who had trusted me with his secrets. And no matter where I had to go, what I had to do, I would make sure that trust wasn't misplaced. The safety deposit box had given me the weapons I needed. Now I would use them to fight back. The motel room was sparse but clean, anonymous in the way only highway accommodations can be. I'd driven 3 hours north to a small coastal town where no one knew the Mitchell family. Paid cash. Used my mother's maiden name. Left my cell phone behind after purchasing a prepaid one. Rain lashed against the windows as I spread the documents across the bed. Copies of everything from the safety deposit box. Notes from my conversations with Daniel and Marcus, printouts of suspicious transactions Daniel had flagged. The connecting threads became clearer the longer I studied them. Rachel and Greg's financial troubles had begun 2 years ago with a series of failed investments in Chicago. Rather than cutting their losses, they'd doubled down, borrowing against their home, maxing out credit cards. By the time Mom's cancer diagnosis came, they were underwater, facing bankruptcy, or worse. Their return to Oak Ridge hadn't been about family duty. It had been a calculated move to access the only significant assets they could still reach: our parents' estate and Dad's business. The prepaid phone rang, startling me. Daniel's number. "Where are you?" he demanded without greeting. "I've been trying to reach you all day." "Somewhere safe," I replied vaguely. "What's happening?" His sigh crackled through the connection. "Rachel and Greg have hired Stuart Bennett." My stomach dropped. Bennett was Oak Ridge's most aggressive attorney, known for scorched earth tactics and questionable ethics. "They're claiming you fabricated evidence," Daniel continued, "saying you stole company documents and invented allegations to try to seize control of the business out of jealousy." "That's absurd," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. It was exactly the kind of spin Rachel had threatened at my apartment door. "It gets worse," Daniel said grimly. "They've filed a restraining order against you, claiming harassment and threats. And they're pushing to have the injunction lifted on the company assets." The walls of the motel room seemed to close in. "What does Chen say?" She's standing firm on the investigation, but Emma..." He hesitated. "Bennett is making a lot of noise about your mental state, claiming grief has made you unstable, paranoid. Rachel provided statements from neighbors who heard you shouting through your apartment door, accusing her of killing your father." I closed my eyes, remembering Rachel's calculated provocation. She set that up deliberately. "I believe you," Daniel assured me. "But it's creating complications. The judge is reviewing the injunction tomorrow. If it's lifted, they could finish draining the company accounts before the investigation concludes." "What about the forged signatures? The fraudulent loans?" "Still being verified by forensic experts. These things take time, Emma. Time we didn't have." "There's something else," Daniel added reluctantly. "Bennett filed a motion to compel disclosure of any safety deposit boxes in your name, or that you have access to. They know that's where the evidence came from." Cold dread washed over me. Can they do that? Chen is fighting it, but if a judge believes you may have removed company documents. The implications were clear. Rachel was trying to discredit me while simultaneously discovering and destroying Dad's evidence. "I need to come back," I decided. "Hiding makes me look guilty." "Be careful," Daniel warned. "Bennett has private investigators watching your apartment. And Emma, check the local news. Rachel's taken their PR offensive public." After hanging up, I found the motel's ancient TV remote and flipped to a Portland news station. The chyron at the bottom of the screen made my heart sink. "Local business owner claims harassment by estranged sister." The camera cut to Rachel, standing in front of Mitchell Financial's office, now emblazoned with a new Parker Financial Group sign. She looked perfectly put together, yet vulnerable, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "This has been such a difficult time for our family," she was saying. "Losing both our parents so close together has been devastating. I had hoped Emma and I could lean on each other, but instead..." She dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue. "Instead, she's created these horrible accusations because she couldn't accept our father's final wishes." The reporter's voice came in. "Rachel Parker claims her sister Emma Mitchell has fabricated evidence of financial wrongdoing after being excluded from their father's will." Cut to Rachel again. "Dad saw that I had the vision to grow his company. He made his choice, and Emma just couldn't handle it. Now she's trying to destroy everything he built with these false allegations." I watched in stunned silence as Greg joined her, his arm protectively around her shoulders. "We're worried about her," he added with convincing concern. "Grief affects people differently, and Emma has always been fragile. We just want her to get the help she needs and stop this destructive behavior." Fragile. The word hung in the air like a poison. They were systematically dismantling not just my case but my credibility, painting me as the unstable, jealous sister while positioning themselves as the concerned, successful family members. I shut off the TV, hands shaking with rage. This was Rachel's strategy: turn public opinion against me, pressure the investigation through media scrutiny, and portray herself as the victim. I had to get back to Oak Ridge immediately, but I couldn't return empty-handed. If Rachel wanted a public battle, I needed to be armed with irrefutable evidence. The drive back to Oak Ridge the next morning was tense, windshield wipers struggling against the persistent rain as I mentally rehearsed my next moves. I'd avoided main roads, changed vehicles, trading Mom's Volvo for a rental car, and kept checking my rearview mirror for signs of being followed. My first stop wasn't my apartment or Daniel's office, but Westside Trust Bank. I needed to secure the original documents from the safety deposit box before Rachel found a way to access them. The bank manager greeted me with professional courtesy that didn't quite mask her recognition. She'd clearly seen the news. "I need to access Box 413, I said, sliding my ID and key across her desk. She hesitated. "Ms. Mitchell, I should inform you that we received a subpoena yesterday regarding this safety deposit box. My heart sank. A subpoena? Yes. We're required to restrict access pending a court hearing tomorrow morning. She looked genuinely apologetic. I'm sorry, but I can't allow you to open the box today. Rachel and Bennett were moving faster than I'd anticipated. They'd managed to freeze the very evidence that could exonerate me. Can you at least confirm that the contents remain secure? I asked. That no one else has accessed it? The manager nodded. The box hasn't been opened since your last visit, and it won't be opened without a court order or your key. Small comfort, but something. I thanked her and left, already calling Ada Chen. They've blocked the safety deposit box, I said when she answered. Bennett got a subpoena. I heard, Chen replied, her voice tight with frustration. Judge Watkins signed it late yesterday. Bennett convinced him the box might contain misappropriated company documents. That's absurd, I protested. The contents were my father's personal records. Which is what I'll argue at tomorrow's hearing, Chen assured me. The problem is, without examining the contents, I can't definitively prove they aren't company documents. A perfect catch-22. What about the injunction on the company assets? Chen's silence told me everything before she spoke. It was partially lifted this morning. They can't sell major assets, but operational accounts were released, meaning Rachel and Greg could continue draining funds through consulting fees and other manipulations. We need to move faster, I insisted. Every day they're destroying more evidence. I understand your frustration, Chen said, her tone measured. But rushing could jeopardize the entire case. We need to be methodical. Methodical wouldn't save Dad's company. Methodical wouldn't stop Rachel from covering her tracks. There's a hearing for the safety deposit box subpoena tomorrow at 9, Chen continued. Be there, be composed, and be prepared for Bennett to attack your credibility. After hanging up, I drove to the corner brew, choosing a table at the back with a clear view of the door. I ordered coffee I didn't want and planned my next move. My phone, the prepaid one, buzzed with a text from Daniel. Where are you? We need to talk in person. I texted back a brief response, and 20 minutes later, Daniel slid into the seat across from me, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. His usually immaculate suit was wrinkled, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. You look terrible, I observed. Bennett's people have been following me, he replied, voice low. Approached my ex-wife, called my mother. They're digging for anything they can use to discredit me as your co-conspirator. A guilt washed over me. Daniel, I'm sorry. I never meant to drag you into this mess. He waved away my apology. I knew what I was getting into, but Emma, they're playing hardball. If they're willing to go after me, they won't hesitate to destroy you. Have you found anything new in the financial records? Daniel glanced around before leaning closer. Yes, but it's complicated. The company books have been altered, expertly. Transactions deleted, dates changed. Without the original records for comparison, it's difficult to prove tampering. What about the loans? The forged signatures? The notary who supposedly witnessed your father's signature has suddenly developed memory problems, Daniel said, bitterly. And the bank officer who processed the loans is claiming all proper procedures were followed. They got to them, I realized. Threatened or bribed them. Daniel nodded grimly. Bennett's specialty. Find the weak links and apply pressure. But there's something else. He pulled out his tablet, opening a spreadsheet. These are deposits to your father's personal account in the months before his death. Large cash amounts, all under the $10,000. Reporting threshold. I frowned, studying the entries. Where did they come from? That's what's interesting. I traced them to cashier's checks purchased with funds from Rachel and Greg's joint account. They were giving Dad money. Why? Not giving, Daniel corrected. Returning. My theory? They'd been siphoning funds from him for months, possibly years. Small amounts he might not notice or might attribute to memory lapses. But then he started to catch on. The realization dawned. So they started returning some of it to avoid suspicion. Exactly. Classic pattern in elder financial abuse cases. Take a lot, return a little, gaslight the victim about their own financial awareness. A new wave of anger surged through me. They hadn't just stolen Dad's business and manipulated his will. They'd been systematically stealing from him long before that. We need to find proof, I said. Something they can't explain away or suppress. Daniel hesitated. There might be a way. Your father's journal mentioned regular meetings with his cancer support group, right? After your mother died? I nodded. Every Thursday evening at Oak Ridge Community Center. Why? In cases of elder abuse, victims often confide in peers before family. If your father shared his suspicions with someone in that group, they could corroborate the journal entries. I finished, hope flickering to life. Provide independent verification that Dad was concerned about Rachel's influence? Exactly. Bennett can claim you fabricated the journal, but he can't dismiss multiple independent witnesses saying the same thing. For the first time in days, I felt a path forward emerging. I'll find them. Today. Daniel looked relieved. Good. Meanwhile, I'll keep digging into the financial records. There has to be a trail they couldn't completely erase. As we parted outside the coffee shop, Daniel gripped my arm. Emma, be careful. You're back in town now, visible. They'll be watching. I nodded, scanning the street for unfamiliar vehicles or faces. I'll check in tonight. The Oak Ridge Community Center was a squat brick building near the town's small park, offering everything from children's dance classes to Medicare seminars. I approached the front desk with careful casualness, aware that news of my unstable behavior had likely spread. Good morning, I said to the elderly volunteer. I'm looking for information about the cancer support group that meets on Thursdays. The woman smiled kindly. The Healing Circle? They meet in room 103 at 7. Were you thinking of joining, dear? Actually, my father attended after my mother's passing. Thomas Mitchell? I was hoping to speak with some of the members he might have been close to. Recognition flickered in her eyes. Oh, Thomas. Yes, he was a regular until his passing. Such a lovely man. She hesitated. Marge Whitaker facilitates the group. She might be able to help you. She provided Marge's contact information, and an hour later, I was sitting in a small cafe with a silver-haired woman whose kind eyes held the wisdom of someone who had guided many through grief. Thomas spoke of you often, Marge said after I'd explained my situation, a carefully edited version that emphasized my concern without mentioning the fraud investigation. He was so proud of how you'd helped grow the business. Did he ever mention concerns about my sister? I asked cautiously. About changes to his will or business affairs? Marge's expression shifted subtly. He became troubled in his final weeks, said things weren't adding up, that decisions had been made, that he couldn't remember agreeing to. My pulse quickened. Did he elaborate? He brought papers to one meeting, asked if they looked like his signature. Several of us told him they didn't. Not exactly. The strokes were similar but too precise, too careful, like someone trying to copy his hand. Independent confirmation of the forgeries. Exactly what we needed. Marge, would you be willing to make a statement to that effect? To a prosecutor? She studied me thoughtfully. This is about the stories in the news, isn't it? Your sister's claims that you're making false accusations? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Thomas was worried about you, she said finally. He told us he'd left something important for you to find, something that would set things right if he couldn't. She reached for her purse. And yes, I'll speak to whoever needs to hear the truth. Thomas was my friend. He deserves better than what's happening to his legacy. Relief flooded through me. With Marge's testimony, and possibly others from the support group, we could establish that Dad had recognized the forgeries, had been planning to correct the situation before his death. As I left the cafe, the weight on my shoulders felt marginally lighter. We were making progress, slow but steady accumulation of evidence that Rachel and Bennett couldn't easily dismiss. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My breath caught as I opened it. We need to talk. Alone. Information about RNG you need to hear. Morton Park, North Bench, 1 hour. No signature. No identifying information. Every instinct told me it was a trap, yet I couldn't afford to ignore a potential source. If someone with insider knowledge was willing to talk. I typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "Someone who knows what really happened to your father." A chill ran down my spine. What did they mean by what really happened? Dad had died of a heart attack, sudden but not unexpected given his medical history, hadn't he? I showed up at Morton Park 30 minutes early, positioning myself where I could observe the meeting spot without being immediately visible. The park was nearly empty on this rainy weekday. A few dog walkers, a mother pushing a stroller, an elderly man feeding pigeons. At the appointed time, a figure in a hooded raincoat approached the north bench. Female, from the build. Slim, moving, cautiously. I watched for several minutes, looking for signs of an ambush, for Greg lurking nearby or Bennett's investigators with cameras. Nothing seemed out of place. Finally, I approached, maintaining awareness of my surroundings. "Hello?" I called softly when I was a few feet away. The woman turned, lowering her hood. Jenna Walsh, Rachel's executive assistant at the newly renamed Parker Financial Group. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't have much time." "Why did you contact me?" I asked, remaining standing, ready to flee if necessary. Jenna glanced around nervously. "I've worked for your father's company for 8 years. He gave me my start when no one else would hire a single mother with no experience." Her hands twisted together anxiously. "What Rachel and Greg are doing, it's wrong, and I can't be part of it anymore." Hope surged within me. "What do you know?" "They falsified documents, lots of them. I was told it was just streamlining transitional paperwork, but then I started finding discrepancies, signatures that didn't match, dates that conflicted with your father's hospital stays." "Did you confront them?" Jenna's laugh was bitter. "I made that mistake once. Greg threatened my job, my apartment, reminded me that single mothers aren't exactly in high demand in Oak Ridge's job market. A classic abuser's tactic: identify vulnerability and exploit it." "What did you mean about what happened to my father?" I pressed. Jenna looked around again before answering. "The day before his heart attack, your father came into the office unexpectedly, found Rachel and Greg going through his personal files. There was a huge argument. I could hear it through the walls. Your father yelling that he'd been blind, but now he saw everything clearly." My breath caught. What happened? Rachel followed him when he stormed out. Came back an hour later looking strange, calm but intense. Said your father wasn't feeling well and had gone home to rest. Jenna swallowed hard. The next morning, we got the call that he'd died. "Are you suggesting—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I don't know," Jenna admitted, "but Rachel had access to your father's medication. And the day after he died, I saw her shredding papers from his desk. When I asked what they were, she said, nothing important. But she seemed relieved." The implication hung in the air between us, too terrible to voice directly. Had Rachel somehow contributed to Dad's fatal heart attack? Tampered with his medication? The thought made me physically ill. "I have copies," Jenna said suddenly, reaching into her coat. "Not everything, but some of the worst forgeries. Documents with your father's signature from days he was demonstrably in the hospital. She handed me a thin envelope. I can't testify. Publicly, my daughter depends on me. But maybe these will help. I took the envelope with trembling hands. Thank you. This is incredibly brave. Jenna stood, pulling her hood back up. Your father was a good man. What they're doing to his legacy, to you, it's wrong. She started to walk away, then turned back. Be careful, Emma. They're desperate now. And desperate people are dangerous. With that warning, she hurried away across the rain-soaked park, leaving me clutching evidence that could finally turn the tide in our favor, and harboring a horrifying new suspicion about my father's death. The documents from Jenna felt like they were burning a hole in my bag as I hurried through the rain to my rental car. I wanted to examine them immediately, but the park was too exposed. Instead, I drove to the public library, found a quiet corner, in the reference section, and carefully spread the papers on the table. What I saw made my hands shake with a mixture of vindication and rage. Loan applications, contract amendments, letters to clients, all bearing Dad's signature on dates when hospital records would prove he was undergoing tests or recovering from procedures. The forgeries were good, similar enough to fool a casual observer, but now that I was looking for the discrepancies, they were unmistakable. The characteristic slight tremor in Dad's handwriting was missing, replaced by smoother, more deliberate strokes. Most damning was a document dated the day after Dad's death, a letter to the company's biggest client assuring them of a seamless transition to new leadership. The signature was identical to those on the other forgeries. Whoever had been signing Dad's name hadn't even bothered to stop after he died. I carefully photographed each document with my prepaid phone, then tucked the originals back into the envelope. These weren't just evidence of fraud anymore, they were potentially evidence of something far darker. The courthouse loomed gray and imposing as I approached the next morning for the safety deposit box hearing. Rain had given way to a heavy mist that clung to everything, making the stone steps slick and treacherous. Like everything else in this battle, I thought grimly. Ada Chen was waiting inside, crisp and composed in a charcoal suit. "You look better than I expected," she observed. "I feel better," I replied. "I found witnesses from Dad's support group who can confirm he suspected document forgery. And I have these." I handed her the envelope from Jenna. Chen's eyebrows rose as she flipped through the papers. "Where did you get these?" "Anonymous source inside the company, afraid of retaliation." She nodded, understanding the need for discretion. "This helps, especially the document dated after your father's death. Clear evidence of forgery." "What about—" I hesitated, not wanting to voice my darkest suspicion aloud in the courthouse hallway. Chen seemed to read my thoughts. "If you're thinking what I think you're thinking, we'd need much more substantial evidence. Medical records, toxicology reports." "His body was cremated," I said quietly. "Rachel handled the arrangements." Chen's expression remained neutral, professional, but her eyes reflected understanding of the implication. "Let's focus on what we can prove today. One battle at a time." The courtroom was nearly empty when we entered. Just a clerk, the judge's assistant, and on the other side of the gallery, Rachel, Greg, and Stuart Bennett. Rachel looked immaculate as always in a navy dress that managed to suggest both corporate authority and feminine vulnerability. Greg sat ramrod straight beside her, his face a mask of righteous indignation. Bennett rose as we approached, all false collegiality. "Valerie," he greeted Chen, "always a pleasure." His gaze slid to me, coolly assessing. "Ms. Mitchell." I nodded stiffly, avoiding direct eye contact with Rachel, though I could feel her stare boring into me. Judge Watkins entered, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a reputation for strict procedural adherence. "Good morning," he said briskly. We're here on the matter of access to Safety Deposit Box 4113 at Westside Trust Bank. Mr. Bennett, as the moving party, you may begin." Bennett approached the bench with practiced confidence. "Your Honor, my clients have reason to believe that Ms. Emma Mitchell has removed confidential company documents from Mitchell Financial Consulting, now Parker Financial Group, and concealed them in this safety deposit box to support fabricated allegations of financial impropriety." "Objection," Chen interjected. "Counsel is presenting assumptions as fact. There's no evidence Ms. Mitchell has removed any company documents." "Sustained," Judge Watkins agreed. "Stick to verifiable facts, Mr. Bennett." Bennett smiled thinly. "The facts, Your Honor, are these. Emma Mitchell was an employee of the company for 10 years. Upon learning she would not inherit control of the business, she began making increasingly erratic accusations against my clients. She has admitted to possessing documents she claims implicate them in wrongdoing, yet refuses to disclose their source or submit them for independent verification." I gripped the edge of the table, fighting to maintain my composure as Bennett painted me as a disgruntled, unstable woman driven by jealousy. "Furthermore," Bennett continued, "my clients, as the rightful owners of Mitchell Financial, have a fiduciary responsibility to secure any company records that may have been improperly removed. We ask the court to authorize examination of the contents of this safety deposit box to determine if it contains misappropriated company property." Judge Watkins turned to Chen. "Ms. Chen, your response?" Chen rose, her movements deliberate and unhurried. "Your Honor, the safety deposit box in question was registered to Thomas Mitchell, not to Mitchell Financial Consulting. Emma Mitchell is an authorized user by her father's explicit designation. The contents are private family documents that have no bearing on the company's operations. Can you verify the nature of these documents without examining them?" Judge Watkins asked. "Ms. Mitchell has described them as her father's personal journal and legal papers, which he explicitly entrusted to her, not to the company, not to Rachel Parker." "Hearsay," Bennett interjected. "We have only Ms. Mitchell's word for that." Judge Watkins frowned. "Mr. Bennett has a point. Without examining the contents, it's impossible to determine their nature." Chen nodded as if conceding the point. "Which is why we propose a compromise. The contents can be examined, but by the court, in camera, not by the opposing parties. This protects any genuinely personal materials while allowing verification that no company property has been misappropriated." Bennett scowled, clearly hoping for direct access to the documents so Rachel could see exactly what Dad had recorded. Judge Watkins considered for a moment, then nodded. "That seems reasonable. The court will examine the contents privately to determine their nature. If they appear to be company property, Mr. Bennett's clients will be granted access. If they're personal in nature, they will remain Ms. Mitchell's private property." Relief washed through me. The journal alone contained enough of Dad's suspicions to validate my concerns, and the court would see it completely unfiltered. "Additionally," Chen added, "we'd like to enter these into evidence." She handed the clerk the documents from Jenna. "These are company communications bearing Thomas Mitchell's signature on dates when hospital records confirm he was physically unable to sign them, including one dated the day after his death." A murmur of surprise escaped Greg before he could suppress it. Rachel's face remained eerily composed, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped her purse. Bennett recovered quickly. "Your Honor, we've had no opportunity to examine these documents. Their provenance is unclear, their authenticity unverified. The signatures can be compared to known samples of Thomas Mitchell's handwriting," Chen replied smoothly. "And the dates can be cross-referenced with hospital admission records. If they prove authentic, they support our contention that Emma Mitchell has been truthful about document forgery within the company." Judge Watkins examined the papers briefly. "I'll admit these provisionally, subject to authentication. Mr. Bennett, your clients will provide verified samples of Thomas Mitchell's signature for comparison by a court-appointed expert." Bennett looked like he'd swallowed something sour. but nodded his agreement. "We'll recess while the contents of the safety deposit box are retrieved and examined," Judge Watkins concluded. "Court will reconvene at 2 o'clock. As we filed out of the courtroom, Rachel intercepted me in the hallway, her voice pitched low to avoid being overheard. "You think you're so clever," she hissed, "but you have no idea what you're up against. Where did you get those forgeries? Who's been feeding you information?" I met her gaze steadily. People who cared about Dad, people who can see what you're doing to his legacy. Something dangerous flickered in her eyes. "You know nothing about legacy. Dad understood that I was the only one who could take the company where it needed to go. He chose me, Emma. Me, not you. Why can't you accept that?" "Because it's a lie," I replied quietly. "Everything about your version of events is a lie, and deep down, you know it. Dad didn't choose you. He discovered what you were doing and was going to stop you. And then he conveniently had a heart attack." Rachel's face went completely blank, a stillness more frightening than any display of anger. "Be very careful what you're implying." "Or what?" I challenged. "What exactly are you threatening me with, Rachel? What else could you possibly take? From me?" She smiled then, a cold curve of lips that never reached her eyes. "You'd be surprised." Greg appeared at her elbow, placing a restraining hand on her arm. "Rachel, not here." She allowed him to lead her away, but the look she cast over her shoulder stayed with me, calculating, assessing, the gaze of a predator determining the most vulnerable point to strike. I retreated to a nearby cafe to wait out the recess too, wound up to eat but forcing myself to sip a cup of tea. My prepaid phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Any news?" I quickly summarized the hearing and Chen's compromise proposal. "Judge is reviewing box contents now. Decision at 2. His response was immediate. "Good development. Found something in financial records. Can prove fund diversion began over a year ago, well before your father's health declined. Meet after court?" Another piece of the puzzle. "Yes. Corner brew at 4. The afternoon session began precisely at 2, Judge Watkins looking somber as he took the bench. The safety deposit box sat on his desk, its contents no longer a mystery to him. Having examined the materials in question, he began, "I find they are indeed of a personal nature. Thomas Mitchell's private journal, personal correspondence, and legal documents pertaining to his estate planning, not company records. As such, they will remain in Emma Mitchell's possession as the authorized user of the safety deposit box." Rachel's face flushed with anger, while Bennett remained stoically professional despite the setback. "Furthermore," Judge Watkins continued, "the journal contains entries that corroborate Ms. Mitchell's concerns regarding possible forgery and financial manipulation. In light of this, and the documents submitted earlier today, I'm granting the District Attorney's request to maintain the partial freeze on company assets pending the outcome of their investigation." A small victory, but significant. Rachel and Greg wouldn't be able to finish stripping the company before the investigation concluded. "Your Honor," Bennett interjected, "my clients vigorously dispute the authenticity of both the journal and the purported forgeries. We request an independent examination by experts of our choosing." "The court will appoint neutral experts, Mr. Bennett," Judge Watkins replied firmly. "This isn't a fishing expedition for your clients to see what evidence exists against them. The investigation will proceed through proper channels." Outside the courthouse, Chen allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. "That went better than expected. The judge was clearly troubled by your father's journal entries." "What happens now?" I asked. "We continue building the case. The forensic accountants are still working through the financial records. The handwriting, experts will examine the signatures. And I'm requesting your father's medical records to review the circumstances surrounding his final days." I hesitated, then voiced the question that had been haunting me since speaking with Jenna. "Do you think there's any possibility that Dad's death wasn't Natural? Chen's expression grew serious. It's a disturbing question, but one we have to consider given the timing and circumstances. Heart attacks can be triggered by stress, which your father was certainly under if he had discovered financial manipulation. But they can also be induced or exacerbated by certain medications or substances. Rachel had access to his medication, I said quietly. It would be very difficult to prove tampering at this point, Chen cautioned, but we'll review the medical examiner's report carefully. In the meantime, Emma, be vigilant. Today was a significant setback for your sister and her husband. People who've committed fraud often become more dangerous when they feel cornered. The warning echoed what everyone seemed to be telling me lately. Rachel was dangerous, desperate, unpredictable, and I was directly in her path. The corner brew was busy when I arrived to meet Daniel, the after-work crowd filling most tables. I spotted him in the back corner, hunched over his laptop, expression intense. You look like you found something, I observed as I slid into the seat across from him. He glanced up, excitement evident beneath his professional demeanor. More than something. The smoking gun. He turned the laptop so I could see the screen. These are transfers from the company's operational account to a shell corporation called Meridian Consulting. Regular payments for strategic advisory services beginning 18 months ago. I scanned the figures, tens of thousands of dollars flowing out monthly. And Meridian Consulting is registered to a P.O. box in Chicago, Daniel explained. But trace the funds from there, and guess where they end up? Rachel and Greg's personal accounts, I guessed. He nodded grimly. They've been bleeding the company for over a year, Emma. Long before your father's health declined. They didn't just manipulate him during a vulnerable period. They were actively stealing from him while presenting themselves as financially successful. The scale of their deception was breathtaking. Not just opportunistic exploitation of Dad's grief after Mom's death, but a long-term scheme of systematic theft. Can we prove the shell company is theirs? I asked. That's the beautiful part, Daniel said, unable to suppress a smile of professional satisfaction. Greg got sloppy. He used the same password for his company email and his personal banking. Our forensic tech found emails discussing Meridian Consulting in his deleted folder and cross-referenced the account destinations. It's ironclad. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the tide truly turning. Between Dad's journal, Jenna's forged documents, Marge's testimony, and now the financial trail, Rachel and Greg's carefully constructed narrative was crumbling. I've forwarded everything to Chen, Daniel continued. She's drafting warrant applications for their personal banking records and devices. Once those are approved, the cafe door burst open, cutting him off mid-sentence. Jenna Walsh stumbled. In, face ashen, eyes wild with panic. Spotting us, she lurched toward our table. They know, she gasped, trembling visibly. They know I gave you the documents. Daniel pulled out a chair for her. Sit down, breathe, tell us what happened. Greg was reviewing security footage, she explained between ragged breaths. From the office. Saw me making copies late yesterday. Confronted me this morning after the hearing. Said I was part of the conspiracy now. Her voice broke. He fired me on the spot. Said I'd never work in Oak Ridge again. I reached across the table, taking her shaking hands in mine. Jenna, I'm so sorry. We can help you find another position. Provide references. You don't understand, she interrupted, genuine fear in her eyes. It's not just the job. He threatened. My daughter. Said accidents happen to children all the time, that I should think carefully about my priorities. Shock and disgust washed through me. He threatened a child? Your child? Jenna nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I've sent her to my mother's in Portland, but I don't know what to do. They're watching my apartment, following me. Daniel's expression hardened. This goes beyond intimidation. It's criminal witness. Tampering. We need to report this to Chen immediately. Will she be able to protect my daughter? Jenna asked, the question cutting to the heart of her fear. I wished I could promise her absolute safety, but the truth was more complicated. She can arrange protective measures, and documenting the threats strengthens the case against them. Daniel was already typing rapidly on his phone. Chen says to bring Jenna directly to her office. She'll take a formal statement and coordinate with Portland PD for protection at your mother's home. Relief softened Jenna's features slightly. Thank you. I never imagined it would go this far, that they'd threaten a child. They're desperate, I said, echoing what everyone had been telling me. The evidence is mounting, and they know it. We escorted Jenna to Daniel's car, planning to drive directly to the district attorney's office. As we crossed the parking lot, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows pulled alongside us, engine idling ominously. The window lowered, revealing Greg's cold stare. Bad move, Jenna, he called, voice carrying across the asphalt. Very bad move. Daniel stepped between Jenna and the vehicle. Drive away now, Parker. You're already facing witness intimidation charges. Greg's laugh held. No humor. Intimidation? I'm expressing concern for a former employee's well-being. His gaze shifted to me. And yours, Emma. Dangerous times. You both should be more careful. The naked threat hung in the air as the window rolled up and the SUV pulled away, tires crunching on wet gravel. Did you get that? Daniel asked, nodding toward a security camera mounted on the cafe's exterior wall. I followed his gaze, understanding dawning. The threat was recorded? If we're lucky, he confirmed. Another piece of evidence. We hurried Jenna into Daniel's car, locking the doors immediately. As we pulled onto the main road, I glanced repeatedly at the side mirrors, half expecting to see the black SUV following. They wouldn't be so blatant, Daniel said, reading my thoughts. Greg's smarter than that. He'll have someone else tail us if they're tracking movements. The realization that we were being hunted, there was no other word for it, settled like ice in my veins. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore, or even fraud. It had escalated to threats, to intimidation, to putting a child at risk. And somewhere beneath it all lurked my growing suspicion about Dad's death, a suspicion I could no longer dismiss as paranoia. At the district attorney's office, Chen listened intently as Jenna recounted Greg's threats, her expression growing darker with each detail. We've moved beyond white-collar crime, she said when Jenna finished. Witness tampering, criminal threats, potential child endangerment. These are felonies with serious consequences. Can you protect her? I asked. Bluntly, we'll coordinate with Portland PD to establish regular patrols near her mother's home, and we can relocate Jenna to a safe location if necessary. Chen turned to Jenna. I know this is frightening, but your testimony is crucial. It corroborates the document forgery and establishes a pattern of intimidation. Jenna nodded shakily. I'll do whatever's needed, for my daughter's sake as much as for justice. They can't be allowed to threaten children and get away with it. As Chen arranged for an officer to take Jenna's formal statement, my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. We need to talk, tonight, about your father's medication. Medical center parking structure, 8 p.m. Come alone. My pulse quickened. Someone with information about Dad's death? Another trap? After Greg's explicit threats, it seemed foolhardy to meet an anonymous source in a deserted parking structure. Yet I couldn't ignore it. Not if there was even a chance of learning the truth about Dad's final days. I showed the message to Daniel, who immediately shook his head. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. What if it's legitimate? What if someone has information about Dad's medication being tampered with? Then they can speak to Chen through proper channels, he argued. Emma, think about it. After everything that's happened today, the hearing, the threats, suddenly an anonymous source wants to meet you alone in a darkened parking garage? It's textbook. He was right. It was too convenient, too risky. At least let me come with you, he insisted when he saw I wouldn't be dissuaded. I'll stay back, keep watch. If anything seems off, we leave immediately. I reluctantly agreed, knowing he was right about the danger, but unable to turn away from potential answers about Dad's death. As twilight descended over Oak Ridge, casting long shadows across the streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were approaching a breaking point. Rachel and Greg were cornered, evidence mounting against them, their carefully constructed life unraveling thread by thread. And cornered predators are the most dangerous of all. The Oak Ridge Medical Center loomed against the darkening sky, its windows glowing yellow in the twilight. I parked my rental car on the street, deliberately avoiding the parking structure mentioned in the text. If this was a trap, I wouldn't walk directly into it. I still think this is a mistake, Daniel said from the passenger seat, scanning the entrance to the parking structure. We should have told Chen. And if it's legitimate? If someone really does have information about Dad's medication? I countered. They might not come forward officially, too afraid of Rachel and Greg. Daniel sighed, unconvinced but resigned. Fine. But we do this my way. I go in first, scout the location. If I text you all clear, you wait 5 minutes, then follow. Any sign of trouble, you drive away immediately. Understood? I nodded, though we both knew I had no intention of leaving if Daniel seemed in danger. He checked his watch. 7:45, I'll head in now. He squeezed my arm briefly. Be careful, Emma. We're close to breaking this case open. Don't take unnecessary risks. I watched him walk toward the parking structure, disappearing into its shadowed entrance. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness as I waited for his text. 7:50, 7:55. At 8 exactly, my phone buzzed. All clear, level 3, near the elevators. Older woman in scrubs. Seems legitimate. Relief washed through me. Not a trap then, or at least not an obvious one. I waited the agreed-upon 5 minutes before following Daniel's path into the parking structure. The concrete echoed with my footsteps as I climbed the stairs to the 3rd level. The parking area was nearly empty at this hour, just a few cars belonging to night shift staff scattered throughout. Near the elevator bank, I spotted Daniel standing beside a woman in blue scrubs, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Emma Mitchell?" she asked as I approached. At my nod, she continued, "I'm Diane Mercer. I was your father's home health nurse during his final weeks." An unexpected connection, but one that made sense. If anyone would have information about Dad's medication, it would be his nurse. "Thank you for contacting me," I said, though I'm curious why the secrecy. Diane glanced nervously around the deserted parking level. "I've been following the news about your family, the allegations against your sister. I wasn't sure what to do, but..." She took a deep breath. "Something wasn't right about your father's death. I've been a nurse for 30 years. I know cardiac events and something about his decline was unusual." My pulse quickened. Unusual how? The sudden deterioration. Thomas had been managing his condition well. His vitals were stable during my morning visit that day. Then your sister arrived, insisted on administering his medication herself, said I could take the afternoon off. Diane's expression darkened. When I returned the next morning, he was gone. Heart attack during the night. "And that seemed suspicious to you?" Daniel prompted. At the time, I attributed it to the natural progression of his condition. But later, cleaning out his medication cabinet, I noticed discrepancies in his prescription counts. Some pills missing that shouldn't have been. Others, extras, that didn't belong. "Did you report this?" I asked. Diane looked down. "To whom?" "The death was ruled natural causes. No autopsy was performed because of his cardiac history. And your sister was so composed, handled everything with the doctor, the funeral home. Too composed. Just as she'd been throughout this entire ordeal." "I convinced myself I was imagining things," Diane continued, "until I saw the news about financial fraud, document forgery. It made me question everything." "Do you have any concrete evidence?" Daniel asked. "Medication records? Notes about the discrepancies?" She nodded, reaching into her bag. "I keep detailed logs of all my patients' medication regimens, including changes or anomalies." She handed me a small notebook. "The relevant entries are marked, and I saved these." From a zippered pocket, she extracted a small plastic bag containing several pills. These were mixed in with his heart medication. They're similar in appearance, but they're not the same. I stared at the pills, a cold certainty settling in my stomach. "You think Rachel substituted these?" "I can't say that definitively," Diane cautioned. "But they shouldn't have been there. And the timing. It's troubling." Daniel carefully took the bag of pills. "We'll need to have these analyzed, and your records could be crucial evidence." Diane seemed to hesitate. "I'm risking my career coming forward with this. If I've misinterpreted, if there's an innocent explanation." "There's a district attorney building a case against Rachel and Greg right now," I assured her. "She'll handle this professionally, confidentially until it's necessary to disclose." "I just want the truth to come out," Diane said simply. "Your father was a kind man. He deserved better." As we exchanged contact information, a car engine roared to life somewhere in the parking structure. Headlights suddenly illuminated the concrete pillars, bearing down on us with alarming speed. "Get down!" Daniel shouted, pulling me and Diane behind a parked car just as the vehicle, a black SUV with tinted windows, screeched past where we'd been standing moments before. The SUV reversed sharply, then accelerated forward again, aiming directly for our hiding place. I caught a glimpse of the driver through the windshield. Greg, his face a mask of fury. "Run!" Daniel pushed us toward the stairwell as the SUV smashed into the parked car we'd been using as shelter, metal crumpling with a deafening crash. We sprinted for the stairs, the SUV's engine revving behind us. Diane stumbled, and I grabbed her arm, half dragging her toward safety. The door to the stairwell was just feet away when I heard the SUV bearing down on us again. Daniel shoved us through the door, following a split second later as the vehicle scraped past, missing him by inches. "Are you hurt?" I gasped, struggling to catch my breath as we huddled in the stairwell. Diane shook her head, though her face had gone pale with shock. Daniel was inspecting a tear in his jacket sleeve where the SUV had caught him. "He tried to kill us," I said, the reality of it sinking in. "Actually tried to run us down." "We need to call the police," Daniel said, already pulling out his phone. "This goes beyond witness intimidation. It's attempted murder." Within minutes, the parking structure was swarming with police officers. An APB was issued for Greg's vehicle. Statements were taken, the damaged cars photographed, security footage requested. Ada Chen arrived as we were finishing with the responding officers, her expression grim but unsurprised. "This is escalating exactly as I feared," she said. "They're panicking." I introduced her to Diane, who repeated her observations about Dad's medication. Chen listened intently, her professional demeanor not quite masking her growing anger. "I'll need the pills for analysis immediately," she said, carefully securing the evidence bag. "And Ms. Mercer, we'll need to arrange protection for you as well." Diane looked overwhelmed but resolute. "I'll cooperate fully, whatever you need." As Diane was escorted to a police cruiser, Chen pulled me and Daniel aside. This changes our timeline. I'm requesting emergency warrants tonight for their phones, computers, financial records, everything. And I'm filing for Rachel's arrest based on witness tampering and Greg's for attempted murder. You think they'll find them? I asked, suddenly fearful of what a cornered Rachel might do next. Greg's vehicle has been spotted heading north on the highway, Chen replied. Roadblocks are being established. As for Rachel, she hesitated. We believe she's still at your father's home. Officers are en route now. The home I'd grown up in, the place I'd helped pack up just weeks ago, now the site of what promised to be a volatile confrontation. I want to be there, I said suddenly. Chen shook her head firmly. Absolutely not. This is a police matter now. It's my family home, I insisted. Rachel might be more willing to surrender peacefully if I'm present. Less chance of anyone getting hurt. Or she might direct her rage at you, Daniel countered. Emma, be reasonable. She and Greg just tried to kill us. Greg tried to kill us, I corrected. Rachel wasn't in that vehicle, and despite everything, I don't believe she would physically harm me. Chen and Daniel exchanged skeptical glances. Please, I pressed. I know her better than anyone. If there's even a chance of diffusing the situation. Chen considered for a long moment. You can accompany us, but you remain in the police vehicle until the scene is secured. That's non-negotiable. I agreed, relief mingling with apprehension. We were reaching the endgame now, the final confrontation with the sister who had betrayed our family so completely. The drive to the family home was tense, a convoy of police vehicles moving through Oak Ridge's quiet streets. As we turned onto the familiar tree-lined avenue, I felt a strange disconnection, as if we were approaching a place I knew intimately, and yet not at all. Police cruisers surrounded the house, lights flashing silently against the darkened windows. No signs of movement inside. An officer approached our vehicle. The house appears occupied, he reported. Lights on in the back rooms. One vehicle, in the garage, registered to Rachel Parker. No response to telephone contact or announcements. Chen nodded grimly. Establish a perimeter. No one approaches without authorization, and get me a direct line to the house. As officers moved into position, I studied the home where I'd spent my childhood. The porch swing Dad had installed when I was 10. The bay window where Mom used to read on Sunday afternoons. The garden they'd tended together, now neglected in the weeks since their deaths. How had we arrived at this moment? Police surrounding our family home, Rachel barricaded. Inside, Greg fleeing justice. It seemed impossible, yet the evidence had built piece by piece until the truth was undeniable. Rachel and Greg had manipulated our father, stolen from him, possibly contributed to his death. And now they were facing the consequences at last. Chen was speaking on the phone, her voice calm but authoritative. Rachel Parker, this is Assistant District Attorney Valerie Chen. The house is surrounded by police officers. Your husband is already being pursued on charges of attempted murder. The situation can only get worse if you refuse to cooperate. Silence. No response from the house. We have clear evidence of financial fraud, document forgery, and elder abuse, Chen continued. Cooperating now is your best option for leniency. More silence. Then, faintly audible through the phone connection, the sound of breaking glass. Movement at the rear of the house, an officer called through the radio. Someone exiting through the back door. Intercept but do not engage unless necessary, Chen ordered. Be advised the subject may be armed. My heart raced as I strained to see through the darkness. This was Rachel, my sister, being hunted in the garden where we'd played as children. Minutes ticked by, unbearably tense. Then a collective exhale as the radio crackled again. Subject in custody, proceeding to transport. Stay here, Chen instructed, exiting the vehicle to oversee the arrest. I watched through the windshield as officers led Rachel from the backyard. Even in custody, she maintained her composure, chin high, shoulders back, the perfect posture she'd cultivated through years of ambition and self-discipline. Until she spotted me in the police car. Our eyes met across the lawn, and for a brief moment, the facade cracked. Naked hatred flashed across her features, followed by something more complex. A flicker of what might have been regret, quickly suppressed. I stepped out of the car despite Chen's instructions, drawn toward this final confrontation with the sister I had once loved. "Emma," Rachel acknowledged coldly as officers paused with her at the edge of the property. "Come to witness your triumph?" "This isn't a triumph," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's a tragedy, for all of us." She laughed, a hollow sound. "Always so sentimental. That was your weakness. Why Dad needed me to take over. I could make the hard decisions you couldn't." "Is that what you told yourself? That exploiting his grief, stealing from him, possibly causing his death, those were just hard decisions?" Something flickered in her eyes. "I didn't..." She stopped herself. "You don't understand what was at stake. Money," I said simply. "Your lifestyle, your image, that's what was at stake. That's what was worth destroying our family for." "You have no idea about the pressures we faced," she hissed. "The debts, the expectations. We were drowning. Dad's business was our lifeline." "You could have asked for help," I countered, honestly, instead of manipulation and theft. For a moment, Rachel's mask slipped completely, revealing the desperate woman beneath. "Ask for help? Admit failure? That was never an option." Her voice dropped. "You were always the good daughter, the one who stayed, who helped. I was the disappointment who left. Coming back a failure would have confirmed everything they thought about me." The raw honesty was startling after weeks of calculation and lies. In that moment, I glimpsed the wounded core driving her actions, the desperate need to prove herself, to be seen as successful at any cost. "So you chose this instead," I said quietly. "Deception, fraud, Dad's death." Her eyes hardened. "Again, I didn't kill him. The medication. It wasn't supposed to harm him. Just make him confused enough to sign what we needed." The heart attack was unexpected. The admission, so casual, so chilling, stole my breath. "You drugged our father to manipulate him." "It was Greg's idea," she said, as if that absolved her somehow. "Things got out of control. I never wanted Dad to die." Chen stepped forward, having overheard the exchange. "Ms. Parker, I advise you to stop speaking without legal representation present." Rachel ignored her, eyes fixed on mine. "You won, Emma. Are you happy now? You've destroyed everything. The business will fold. The house will be seized. Our family name tarnished forever." "You did that," I replied, a strange calm settling over me. "Not me. I just exposed the truth." Officers began leading her toward a waiting police car. She resisted slightly, turning back to me one last time. "He did love you more, you know," she said, a final barb aimed at what she perceived as my deepest insecurity. "That's why I had to work so hard to convince him otherwise, to make him doubt you." I smiled sadly, recognizing the statement for what it was, Rachel's own projection, her own pain. "That's where you're wrong. Dad loved us both. Differently, perhaps, but completely. That's why the safety deposit box was so important. It showed his trust in me, not his preference." Something in my words seemed to reach her, a flash of understanding, crossing her face before the mask descended once more. Without another word, she allowed herself to be placed in the police car, staring straight ahead as they drove away. I stood on the lawn of my childhood home, watching the flashing lights recede into the distance. The confrontation I had both dreaded and needed was over, Rachel would face justice, as would Greg once he was apprehended. The truth about Dad's death would be fully investigated, his legacy protected. Chen approached, placing a hand gently on my shoulder. That admission about the medication is significant, self-incriminating. Will it be enough? I asked. To prove what happened to Dad? Combined with the nurse's evidence and a toxicology analysis of the pills? Potentially. She studied my face. Are you all right? An impossible question with no simple answer. I will be, I said finally. Eventually. The house stood silent before us, no longer the warm family home of my memories, not yet whatever it would become next. Like everything else in this ordeal, it existed in a liminal space, between past and future, grief and healing, ending and beginning. What happens to the house now? I asked. It's evidence in an ongoing investigation, Chen explained. But eventually, once legal matters are settled, ownership will likely revert to you as the rightful heir under your father's original will. The home where I'd grown up, where Mom and Dad had lived and loved and eventually died. The thought of returning to it, of reclaiming it, filled me with conflicting emotions. Would you like to go inside? Chen offered. Officers have secured the premises. It might provide some closure. I considered the offer, then shook my head. Not tonight. Tonight I need distance. As we turned to leave, something caught my eye, a flicker of movement in the bay window. For a disorienting moment, I imagined Mom sitting there with her book, or Dad adjusting the curtains before bed. A ghost of memory, nothing more. But it reminded me that beneath the pain and betrayal of recent events lay the foundation of a family that had once been real. Parents who had loved their children. Sisters who had shared secrets and dreams before ambition and insecurity drove them apart. That night, I slept in my small apartment above the hardware store, surrounded by the hastily packed boxes of my life. In the morning, I would face the practicalities of the aftermath. Statements to police, evidence cataloging, the slow grinding machinery of justice. But for now, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. The loss, not just of my parents, but of the sister I had once known. The destruction of family bonds that should have been unbreakable. And yet, amid the grief, a sense of possibility emerged. The chance to rebuild on truth rather than deception. To honor Dad's legacy by carrying forward the values he had lived by. Integrity, hard work, compassion. A week later, the headlines told the story of Rachel and Greg's arraignment on multiple felony charges: financial fraud, elder abuse, attempted murder. The medication found in Dad's system matched the pills Diane had preserved, creating a clear link to his suspicious death. Greg, captured at the Canadian border, had already begun negotiating a plea deal, eager to implicate Rachel in exchange for leniency. The family business, though wounded by their predations, was salvageable. With Marcus Hoffman's help, I began the process of restoring Mitchell Financial Consulting to its original mission, serving the community Dad had loved, the clients who had trusted him for decades. The safety deposit box remained in my possession, its contents now part of the official record, but its significance transcending legal proceedings. Dad had trusted me with his secrets, his suspicions, his final attempts to right the wrongs being perpetrated against him. In doing so, he had provided the means for justice to prevail, even from beyond the grave. On a crisp autumn morning, exactly 6 months after Dad's death, I stood once more before the family home. The police tape was gone, the investigation concluded. The key felt heavy in my hand as I approached the front door. Inside, the house was eerily quiet, Rachel's renovations abandoned mid-process. Half-painted walls, furniture draped in drop, cloths, the physical manifestation of interrupted deception. I moved through the rooms slowly, reacquainting myself with spaces that held both joy and pain. In Dad's study, which Rachel had planned to convert to a home gym, I found his desk, still intact, though cleared of papers and personal items. Kneeling beside it, I felt along the underside until my fingers located the small, hidden compartment Dad had shown me years ago. "Every man needs a place for his secrets," he'd said with a wink. The compartment slid open at my touch, revealing a single envelope addressed to me in Dad's distinctive handwriting. I opened it with trembling fingers, unfolding the letter within. Emma. If you're reading this, I suspect things have gone badly. I've felt something wrong for weeks now. Missing documents, changed signatures, Rachel's sudden interest in the of a business. I've kept this letter separate from the safety deposit box as a final safeguard. Whatever has happened, know that I trust you to set things right. The company we built together is my legacy to you. Not because you're more loved than your sister, but because you understand what it truly represents. Not profit or prestige, but service to our community. Faith kept with clients who trust us. Integrity above all. Rachel chose a different path long ago. I've tried to guide her back, but some journeys must be made alone. I fear her choices have led her somewhere dangerous, for herself and perhaps for our family. If I'm gone and things are not as they should be, use what I've left in the safety deposit box. The truth has a way of emerging with the right advocate. Know that I am proud of you, that your mother would be proud, and that whatever happens, next, you have the strength to face it. All my love, Dad. Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. The letter, Dad's final message, contained no revelations, no smoking gun. Just confirmation of what I had already discovered through painful experience, that he had seen the danger approaching, that he had trusted me to address it, that his love, despite Rachel's manipulations, had remained steadfast. I carefully folded the letter and placed it in my pocket. Then I began the process of reclaiming the house, opening windows to release the stale air, removing the drop cloths to reveal the furniture beneath, erasing the half-completed changes that would have transformed it into something unrecognizable. This house, like the company, like my relationship with my sister, would never be what it once was. Too much had happened, too many truths revealed. But from the wreckage, something new could emerge. Not perfect, not unmarked by tragedy, but authentic. As the afternoon sunlight filtered through the bay window, I sat in Mom's favorite chair, Dad's letter in my lap, and began to envision a future built on the foundation they had provided. A future where the safety deposit box, that small, seemingly insignificant repository of truth, had changed everything. Not through the money it contained, but through the trust it represented. The belief that even in our darkest moments, truth would find its advocate, justice its champion, love its vindication. And in that quiet moment of reflection, I found what had been missing throughout this painful journey: peace. Not the peace of forgetting, but the peace of knowing that despite everything, I had honored my father's final wish. I had protected his legacy. I had set things right. The safety deposit box had been his final gift to me, and I had used it well. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.